Welcome back, listeners. We're diving deep today into Listen, Little Man by Wilhelm Reich.
Hmm.
This book, it's quite a departure from what you might normally associate with him,
Right.
You know, his work in psychoanalysis and all that, written back in 1941.
Yeah, this one, it's more like a personal outcry, not so much a scientific document.
It's almost like he's writing a letter, a very strongly worded letter,
Mhm.
directly to the reader. And, well, he doesn't really hold back on the critiques, does he?
Not at all. It's directed at, well, he calls him the little man.
Right, the little man. Who exactly is this little man? Why was Rex so passionate about him?
So the little man isn't one specific person. It's more like a representation, an archetype, you could say, of just the average person, caught up in all the pressures of society and fear.
Okay, so he's talking about like everyday people, not necessarily someone in a position of power or anything like that.
Right. And he's not trying to put them down, It's more like a wake-up call to kind of shake them out of their routines, make them see how they might be contributing to their own, well, oppression in a way.
He doesn't paint a very flattering picture, though, does he? I mean,
Yeah.
easily manipulated, living in fear. It's almost like he's suggesting we're all just kind of sleepwalking through life.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you mean. But it's more about recognizing those patterns in ourselves, right? Like how we react to things.
He has this one example about knowledge, how the little man relates to knowledge.
Right. Instead of being curious, being open to new information, he twists it, to fit what he already believes, even if those beliefs might be, well, harmful.
So it's not about lacking knowledge, but more about how we use it or maybe misuse it sometimes.
Exactly. It's like going to lectures, reading books, not to learn, but to find things that back up what you already think.
Interesting. I can see how that could apply to, well, pretty much anyone. It's easy to fall into that trap.
Correct.
Oh, for sure. And Reich, he really saw that as a huge obstacle, this fear of being wrong, this clinging to, well, comfortable lies.
Okay, so was this book just a way for him to criticize society? Or was there something, a deeper message he was trying to get across?
Well, he definitely criticizes society, certain structures and all, but his main goal, I think it was to spark change within the individual.
So a call to action rather than just a complaint.
Exactly. He wanted to empower the little man to break free from, those shackles of fear, those social norms.
So to challenge the status quo, to think critically.
Right.
This whole idea of the emotional plague, right? It comes up a lot in the book. What did he actually mean by that?
It's this widespread suppression of emotions, both in individuals and in society as a whole. He saw it as leading to all sorts of problems, anxiety, depression, even violence. To really understand it, though, you have to know about his concept of orgone energy.
Okay, orgone energy. I have to admit, I'm not too familiar with that part of his work.
So Reich believed in this universal life force, this energy that flows through everything, all living beings. And he felt that emotional blocks, and those societal restrictions, they disrupt that natural flow. And that leads to physical and psychological issues.
Interesting. So the more we bottle up our emotions, the more we constrict this energy.
Right. And that contributes to the emotional plague.
It's almost like we're creating a prison for ourselves. From the inside out.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way to put it. And Reich believed that this emotional plague had a huge impact on, well, everything really, our relationships, our work, even our political systems.
Yeah, we know Reich was critical of a lot of aspects of society, but were there specific things he called out?
Oh, he went after just about everything. Political systems that, prioritize control over freedom, social morals that force people to conform, to be inauthentic. He even criticized scientific research.
Oh, wow. So he wasn't afraid to step on some toes.
Not at all. He saw those structures as keeping the emotional plague going, trapping people in this cycle of fear.
And then there's this term, the little great men. I'm curious about them. Who are these little great men, and what's their role in all this?
So think about those figures in history, right? The ones who rose to power by taking advantage of people's fears, their insecurities. Reich argued that they're not actually great inherently. They know how to manipulate.
Oh, so they exploit the little man's anxieties to gain power. Interesting.
Yeah, they offer these empty promises, like security, belonging, and
Wow.
people they buy into because they're afraid.
So it's not just about the little man being a victim, but also about how he plays a role in perpetuating these systems.
Right. And Reich, he wanted to empower the little man to see through that, to reclaim his own, well, his own agency, his own power.
That's powerful. It's like we have a choice. Be
Mhm.
controlled or break free and make our own rules.
Exactly. And that choice, according to Reich, it starts with, well, with confronting those fears and embracing, your true self.
Okay, that's a good point. So we've laid some groundwork here, explored some of the key ideas. Now I want to dive into some specifics. Some of the things Reich observes about human behavior.
He definitely didn't hold back on those observations, did he?
Yeah, and what's amazing is how much of it still rings true today, even after all these years.
Oh, absolutely. Prepare yourself. It can get a little uncomfortable because, well, Reich has this way of shining a light on those parts of ourselves we might rather keep hidden. So one of the things Reich talks about is love, right? Relationships.
Hmm.
And his take on it, it's, well, it might surprise you a little.
Really, he wasn't like big on romance. Was
Yeah.
he a total cynic about love?
Not exactly cynical. He believed in love, sure, but he was, well, critical of how it's often, twisted, used for control, manipulation, that sort of thing.
Oh, interesting. So how did he see that playing out?
Well, he says the little man, he's drawn to partners who kind of reinforce his insecurities instead of, challenging him to grow.
So we're attracted to people who keep us in our comfort zones, even if those zones aren't, well, all that healthy for us.
Think about it. How often do we pick people who fit these familiar patterns, even when those patterns have caused us unhappiness before?
Yeah, I can see that. Like choosing the familiar, even if it's not good for us, sticking with the devil you know.
Right, because it feels safer, but it might not be what's truly fulfilling. And this ties back to, the emotional plague idea. Reich saw emotional suppression as a huge factor in sabotaging relationships.
That makes sense. We're so afraid of being vulnerable, of getting hurt, so we build walls around ourselves.
Exactly. It's like, there's this passage where Reich says, you beg for happiness, but security is more important to you, even if it costs you your spine or your life.
Wow, that's intense.
Right. It's like we're willing to give up our very essence, our core, just for this illusion of safety.
We trade our true selves for a gilded cage.
Exactly. And Reich's challenge is to break out of that cage. Embrace the uncertainty, the risk that comes with true freedom.
Speaking of risk, Reich didn't shy away from controversial topics.
Right.
Especially for the time period, right?
Oh, not at all. Sex, religion, politics. He went there.
And he was writing this in the early 20th century, right?
Yeah.
I can only imagine how some of these ideas were received back then.
Oh, yeah. Especially his views on sexuality. Pretty revolutionary for the time. He felt that repressing sexuality contributed to, neurosis and happiness. And he advocated for a more open, accepting approach to sexual expression.
That definitely would have raised some eyebrows back then.
It did. But, his core message about freedom, honesty, challenging those norms, it's still incredibly relevant, even today.
So what about religion? You mentioned he was critical of organized religion. What specifically bothered him?
He saw it as another form of control,
Yeah.
suppression. He argued that it often, it promoted fear, guilt, instead of love, compassion.
So he wasn't anti-spirituality, more like anti-dogma.
Right. He felt like organized religion, it encouraged people to look outwards for answers instead of trusting their own inner wisdom.
And what about politics? We know he identified as a socialist, but he was also critical of both capitalism and decommunism. How does that work?
It does seem kind of complex, right? But it reflects his overall philosophy. Individual freedom, self-determination. He believed in social justice, equality. But any system that put the state above the individual, that's what he was wary of.
So both capitalism and communism could be oppressive in his view.
Yeah, he felt like they could be, dehumanizing in their own ways.
What did he propose instead? Like, what kind of political system did he envision?
He talked about individual anarchism, people being free to live according to their own values, no interference from the state or any external authority.
It's a pretty bold vision, but also it seems, I don't know, maybe a little fragile. How could something like that actually work in practice?
That's a good question. It's a debate that, people are still having today. But Reich, he believed that true harmony, it could only happen when individuals were completely free to express themselves fully, to live in accordance with their own well, their own inner truth.
Sounds pretty utopian.
It is, for sure, but it challenges us to imagine something different, right? Beyond our current systems.
Now let's talk about work. It seems like Reich had well, a unique perspective on the role of work in our lives.
He definitely didn't see it as just a way to, pay the bills. It was more like an expression of our creative potential, a way to connect with something bigger than ourselves.
So work as a form of self-expression, not just a means to an end.
Exactly. And he'd say that the way a lot of people view work today, like a grind, something you got to endure, that's a symptom of the emotional plague.
We've become disconnected from our true passions, our purpose.
Right. He believed work could be a source of deep satisfaction, but only if it aligned with our values, our gifts.
So it's not just about finding a job you're good at, but finding work that, I don't know, that speaks to your soul.
Exactly. It should energize you, bring you joy, connect you to something bigger.
I love that idea. Work is a source of energy, not just a drain.
Right. But it requires us to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
About what truly matters, what we're passionate about, what kind of legacy we want to leave behind.
So aligning work with our values, with our purpose, that's a powerful concept.
It is. And it's about approaching work with, I don't know, a sense of curiosity, playfulness even.
Reich believed that work shouldn't feel like a burden, but more like a celebration.
A celebration of our potential, yeah.
Now, Reich was critical of so much of modern society. So I'm curious, what did he think about technology? I mean, he didn't have to deal with the internet or social media, but he did see the rise of, industrialization, mass media, things like that.
Yeah, he was wary. He saw the potential for technology to be used for control, manipulation.
So even back then, he was already seeing those dangers.
Oh, absolutely. He saw how mass media could spread propaganda, create fear, encourage conformity, and industrialization. He felt it led to this disconnect from nature, a feeling of alienation.
It's almost like he was predicting the problems we're facing today, with social media, the constant connection, but also this sense of isolation, the spread of misinformation, the erosion of privacy.
He was definitely ahead of his time in a lot of ways. I think he'd be pretty concerned about how intertwined technology has become with our lives.
So what do you think he'd say about social media specifically? Tool for connection or just another form of control?
That's a good question. I think he'd see both sides, He'd recognize the potential for connection, for positive social movements even, but the dangers, he'd be all over those.
The addiction, the echo chambers, the way algorithms manipulate us.
Exactly. And especially, I think he'd be concerned with how social media encourages us to present a certain image, a curated version of ourselves.
Constantly seeking validation through likes, followers, comparing ourselves to others and feeling inadequate.
Right. He'd see that as the little man's need for approval, his fear of being different.
It's like we're all performing for this invisible audience, trying to be perfect instead of embracing our flaws.
And that performance, it's exhausting. It disconnects us from our true selves, from what's real.
So how do we break free from that? How do we resist the pull of social media and be more authentic?
I think Reich would say it starts with finding validation from within. Our worth isn't determined by likes or followers. It comes from within.
And real connection, it comes from vulnerability, not from presenting this perfect image.
He'd also encourage us to, step outside those echo chambers, engage with different perspectives, challenge our own beliefs.
Get out into nature more. Reconnect with the natural world.
He saw nature as a source of healing, a reminder that we're all connected, a balance to all the artificiality of modern life.
Now, before we move on to Reich's ultimate message, his call to action, I want to touch on something we've been circling around, this idea that so many of his observations, they still feel relevant, even today.
It's amazing, isn't it? The world's changed so much since he wrote this book, but the challenges, the dilemmas he talked about, they're still there.
It's like he tapped into something fundamental about being human.
He had this ability to see through, the illusions, the facades we create to protect ourselves. He cut through all the noise, all the distractions, and exposed the raw, vulnerable heart of the human experience.
And he didn't hold back, did he? He was so direct, so honest. It could be uncomfortable to read at times, but it's also, I don't know, kind of liberating.
Because in his honesty, we see ourselves, right? And that reflection, it gives us a chance to wake up to our potential.
So let's talk about that potential. What does Reich say we can actually do about this little man problem?
Well, he doesn't offer a quick fix. He didn't believe in, following leaders or movements blindly. True change, for him, it had to come from within.
From examining our own beliefs, our own behaviors.
Exactly. And he does offer some practices, some perspectives that can help. He talks about self-awareness, understanding our motivations, our patterns.
Becoming more aware of how fear, how social conditioning influences us.
Right. And he emphasizes emotional honesty, learning to, recognize and express our feelings in a healthy way.
Instead of suppressing them, pushing them down.
Yeah, because he saw emotions as energy, as
Mm.
power. And when we repress them, we're cutting ourselves off from that.
He also talks about living in the present moment, being fully present.
Right. Not dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. He saw the present moment as the only place where real life exists, where we can truly connect with ourselves, with others, with the world.
And that's where we find joy, love, fulfillment.
Exactly. And he stressed the importance of connection, building authentic relationships based on love, respect, understanding.
Creating communities that support individual growth, expression, where people feel safe to be themselves.
Yeah, a world where difference is celebrated, where diversity is a strength, and everyone has the chance to thrive.
It's a powerful vision. And it's important to remember Reich wrote this during a very dark time, fleeing Nazi persecution, witnessing the rise of fascism.
And yet, even in all that darkness, he held on to hope. He believed in a better world. He believed in the power of individuals to create change.
That's a message that's, well, it's more relevant than ever as we navigate our own complex world.
Absolutely. Listen, little man, it's a call to action, a reminder that we have the power to create the world we want to live in.
It's not about following rules or any specific ideology. It's about connecting with our own truth, embracing our gifts, living authentically,
Choosing love over fear, freedom over security, connection over isolation.
waking up to the possibilities within us, creating a world that reflects the best of who we are.
Listening to that little man within, not to judge him, but to understand him, embrace him, help him find his way back to wholeness.
Recognizing that the little man isn't just some character in a book. It's us, our struggles, our fears, our hopes.
It's about looking in the mirror and seeing ourselves, truly seeing ourselves, and choosing again and again to live a life that's true to who we are.
Remembering that we're not alone on this journey. We're all connected, and together we can create something better.
Believing that another world is possible, and doing the work day by day to make it happen.
It's about taking that first step, no matter how small, and trusting that the path will kind of reveal itself as we go.
And remembering that, well, we don't have to do it all alone, right? There's support out there, friends, mentors, people who've walked this path before us.
One thing that really struck me about Listen, Little Man is that, well, even though it's a critique, right, of the common man, there's also this real sense of compassion, empathy even.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Right, he wasn't trying to put anyone down. He wanted to understand, to help people break free from those limitations, the things that keep us from experiencing real happiness.
It's like he saw the little man as a victim of his circumstances almost, of a society that teaches us to shrink ourselves, to be afraid, to settle.
Yeah, to accept less than we deserve. He believed the little man was capable of so much more, of love, of creativity, but he also saw how easily that potential could be, well, crushed by fear, by conformity, by that need to fit in.
And it's that belief in the little man's potential, that unwavering hope that makes this book so powerful, I think, so enduring.
It really does. It's a book that challenges us to see the humanity in everyone, even those who seem different from us, to remember that we're all connected and we can create something better together.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Listen, Little Man, I want to leave you with this. Reich wrote this over 80 years ago. A time of so much turmoil. The world was on the brink of war. Fascism was rising. It was a dark time. But even in all that, Reich held on to this belief in a better world. He believes in the power of individuals to make a difference, to break free, to build something new. And that message, well, it couldn't be more relevant today, could it? So as you go about your day, remember those words. Listen, little man. You are capable of so much more than you realize. You have the power to create the world you want to live in, so go out there and make it happen.
And never forget, love, work, and knowledge are the wellsprings of our life. They should also govern it.